A ver. Ok, muy bien, muy bien. Y buenos días. Espero que ustedes estén bien. I hope you guys are all well. Um, ah, a ver. We had a couple new people. I was going to have them introduce themselves, but they're not here yet, so I guess we won't do that. Okay. A ver, vamos a practicar. Vamos a practicar con las cositas de qué. We're kind of starting the winter session with our little word stuff because we've got a new theme someone requested, which I know is a frequent deal. Yeah. I think we want to do is we want to start off with que, our pick up where we left off with that. We'll do a little recap to remind people what the topic is there. And then we're going to come back, circle around to the listening comprehension video about free time and take questions on that and kind of use that as a launch board into the next topic someone requested, which I know is worth the effort. Vale la pena, vale la pena. Okay. Um, primero, vamos a repasar un poquito. We're going to take just un pasito atrás, a little teeny tiny step backwards so that you know what we're practicing. It helps to get ourselves oriented. Does anyone else have difficulty or getting their brain organized in the morning? Yeah, it's starting a task I do. Um, okay, a ver. Aquí, bien, mejor, mejor. ¿Qué? You had a video that talked about lots of uses of que. And in so what this is a continuation of what we started last week, which is that a lot of times we want to speak in English. We want to speak Spanish without having to translate in our heads. And a lot of people complain, and this is a frequent speed bump that learners have, is, there is such a thing as keeping things simple, but in reality, we have lots of ideas we connect when we speak in English, and therefore we want to be able to do that in Spanish. And that becomes a speed bump we have to get over. But one of the speed bumps is that many times we connect little mini sentences to another easy mini sentence. So connecting these ideas to make longer sentences doesn't necessarily have to be hard. It can be simple. And if we practice it in simpler steps, it becomes easier to do later without having to think and without having to translate a lot. And this little word que is one of those things that we use a lot to connect many ideas together, right? Dice
Pregunta,
que,
por
creo que,
favor.
sí, pregunta, sí, Nora.
Ah, noto que con la gente, I wanted to say the person who is on the left, but would we use que versus quien?
Buena pregunta. You would use que. You could use quien, but it would sound kind of formal. So let me
Okay,
explain a little bit. In English, we might say the person that has a phone in her hand, or the person that's standing to my left. Or we might choose to say instead of that, who, the person who is standing to my left. And either either connecting word that or who works in English.
okay, yeah,
In Spanish, it is a little more usual to just use que instead of quién to talk
okay,
about people. Um, and wh when you will hear quién more is if it's, especially if it's in formal writing, and especially if it's a long clause with commas in it to, set it off and like a longer clause in the middle
okay,
instead of something simple. So you can use quien, but conversationally, it is much more common to just use que. to talk about people.
Gracias.
Okay. You need to use quien if you've got a preposition like a or en or con. Okay. So in that situation, if we've got instead of just que or quien with a little description, if you're using la persona a quien me refiero. La persona a quien me
Mm.
refiero.
Okay.
With a, I can't use a que refiero. Have to be a quien to talk about a person because of that little a word. It's just the way it is. If you got a preposition a con quien, or con en de, la persona de, yeah, it's just those little prepositions require quien, but otherwise it'll be que. It'll be
Okay.
que. Um, okay. Uh, like this example here. Conozco a alguien que tiene un árbol con limones. I know a person who has a lemon tree. I know a person that has a lemon tree. In English, you can use either. In Spanish, conversationally, you're not going to hear quien in this example. All right. You'll have quien if you've got a very long clause in the middle, but usually when we speak to each other, it's shorter bits of information we connect back and forth. Okay. Or like this one, tengo un pariente que vive en el norte de California. Tengo un pariente que vive. Yeah. Um, Here's where you might hear quien instead of que in this example. Tengo un pariente, coma, quien vive en la bonita ciudad de Half Moon Bay in el norte de California. Now I've got a great big long thing. And you
Okay.
might hear quien in that situation, but you're going to hear quien more in that kind of situation when it's in writing and it's a long connecting idea. And we're not practicing long connecting ideas because we want to be able to connect short ideas that you can think of quickly. Yeah. Here's the example uh, of when I need an a, when I need a con, yeah, that I need that word quien. Okay, but here, la chica que baila allá, the girl who is dancing or that is dancing, that will not use quien. It'll just use que. People will use that because it's a short sentence. It's not a great big explanation. Here is a great big explanation
Okay.
that might use quien. El jefe, comma, quien se encargó de la empresa al fin de 2024, comma. Yeah. A long description like that, somebody might choose to use quien. Okay. Especially if they're giving a speech or if they're putting it in writing in a newspaper.
Okay.
Um, all right. But otherwise, it'll be the shorty word que to talk about a person like that. Make sense? See?
Sí.
Okay. Vale. We have this example that we ended with, sí, la mujer que tiene el micrófono, the woman who has the mic, see, and nobody would think it would be very uncommon to hear quién. Que would be common, and these little que things are describing people. Okay, so I asked you to think of some examples here, maybe to finish these up. And I gave you one example for each. La bebida que, the drink that. See? La bebida que lleva o la bebida que tiene anís no me interesa. I don't really like uh, drinks with anisette. Yeah, I'm not partial to those. See? Hay otro ejemplo con la bebida que. Lori.
La bebida que yo necesito de la mañana es el refresco Diet Pepsi.
Ah, perfecto, perfecto. La bebida que necesito. ¿Qué necesito? The drink that I need. Yeah, we do this all the time in English, and you can do it in Spanish too. You're just tagging on a little bit of information, not a great big complicated thing. Muy bien.
Marilyn,
Sí,
a question about that. Was that correct? And rather than saying en la mañana, it would be de la mañana?
it would be en la mañana or por la mañana. You hear
Oh,
both. Yeah.
okay. So I was
Por la
totally wrong.
mañana o en la mañana. De la mañana is often used when we're in a time telling mode. Okay. Son las 10 de la mañana.
Okay.
Yeah. But when you say you're doing something in the morning, um, some regions favor en la mañana, some regions favor por la mañana. I would say in general, en la mañana might be a little more favored in Mexico. Por la mañana might be favored a little bit more in Spain, but that's not a real strict rule. You can hear it either way. Buena pregunta. Carrie, ¿tienes otro ejemplo?
La bebida que me gusta con comida mexicana es una margarita.
Excelente. La bebida que me gusta. La bebida que me gusta. Perfecto. Easy to connect that little idea, and it's not a great big long thing. It's easy to come up with that, putting together two really shorty ideas with that que word. Fantástico. Otro ejemplo con la bebida que. Diana.
La bebida que está sobre la mesa es tuyo.
Sí, sí. La bebida que está sobre la mesa o en la mesa es la tuya, es tuya. Sí, es la tuya, porque es bebida, sí, es la tuya.
You have to
It's
say la.
yours.
May I
Sí.
ask a question about your response? La bebida que lleve tiene es no me interesa. Is that if I agree, is that yo tampoco because it was a negative, or is it not because that's not the part that you're supporting?
Oh, wait, this part here?
Yes. Do you say if you agree with that statement?
Oh, if you agree, if somebody responds to
If
that.
you agree with that statement, is it yo tampoco because it's a negative?
It's yo tampoco. It's yo
It is
tampoco
yo
because it's negative.
tampoco.
Sí, exacto.
Okay.
Sí, sí,
Okay.
exacto. Exactly. If you say, yeah, I feel the same way, but I'm agreeing with a negative idea. The response will generally be, sí, a mí tampoco. Not me either. Sí, a mí no me interesa tampoco. A mí no, ah, tampoco. Sí, eso. Bien, yeah. Uh, Agreeing with an affirmative statement is yo también or a mí también.
I think I finally got that.
You do. Yeah, if you picked up on that, sí. Felicitaciones, congratulations. That is a very good thing. And you're applying something from way back into this. Eso sí me gusta mucho. Bien. Hay otro ejemplo con la bebida que. And notice one example showed where it's located, que está en la mesa, right? One example talks about connecting, oh, that I like, que me gusta mucho. There are lots of different uh, uh, thing, lots of different ideas you can use to talk about a description or how you feel or where it is. Yeah, there's a real variety of things that we can use. Bueno, adelante. El hombre qué? El hombre qué? And we're switching from a thing, la bebida, to a person, el hombre qué. So this ties into what Nora brought up. We normally think of, well, don't you connect quién with a person? Well, yes, you do, but with this, tagging on a clause in conversation, it'll normally become que. El hombre que se sienta allá es mi jefe. The guy sitting over there is my boss. Yeah. The guy that is sitting over there is my boss. We need that little que word wedged in there. Otro ejemplo, el hombre que.
El hombre que vino anoche a mi casa es mi primo.
Exacto. El hombre que vino anoche, the man who came last night, the man that came last night, ¿sí? Es mi primo. Perfecto. Bueno, Lori.
And I have a question too, whether conocer is reflexive or not. So I'll read you how I wrote it. El hombre que conocí ayer era amistoso.
Buena pregunta. Sí. El hombre a quien conocí. A quién. That's a tricky one. Um, ooh, because man is receiving the action, really. Yeah, a quien. That's one of those little a quien examples. A quien
Oh,
conocí. Yeah. Who, whom I became with whom I became acquainted, which nobody would say in English. It's great English, but nobody would say it that way. Yeah, that'll have an a quien, but that's a little different. Okay.
and and does conocer, it's not reflexive,
No,
correct?
conocer is not reflexive. Conocer is can be reflexive when it is reciprocal. And for it to be reciprocal, you have to be talking about two people who met each other. Okay.
Okay.
Un ejemplo. Um, Mi esposo y yo nos conocimos. We met each other because there are two of us, and we're
Okay.
the one is connected to the other. ¿Sí? Nos conocimos en un avión. We met each other on a plane. Nos conocimos en un avión. O, por ejemplo, um, mis amigos se conocieron en la universidad. My friends met at university. They met each other. There's got to be one tied to the other. Sí, bien.
Thank you.
But otherwise, just somebody met somebody else, not reflexive there.
Okay.
Buen ejemplo, sí. El hombre que. ¿Hay otro ejemplo con el hombre que? El hombre que. Ok, bien. ¿El vecino qué? El vecino qué. La vecina que vive en la Casa Blanca, or the neighbor who lives in the White House, ¿sí? Tiene un jardín precioso. La vecina que vive en la Casa Blanca. Nora.
La vecina que está aprendiendo español se llama Carrie.
Bien, sí. Perfecto. Muy bien, muy bien. Bueno, otro ejemplo.
El vecino que tiene el perro negro trabaja en mi oficina.
Eso, sí, sí. Bien, bien. Ah, sí. Ah, Lori.
A veces los vecinos que viven arriba son ruidosos.
Bien, bien. Ok, muy bien, sí. Ah, ah, la, la vecina que no saca su basura es muy desagradable. La vecina que no saca su basura, doesn't take out her trash, que no saca su basura, sí, es muy desagradable. Por ejemplo, bien, vale. Otro ejemplo. Bueno, ok, adelante. This is a little different because it is a photo prompt. So you have to think a little more imaginatively, but we have people that we may want to designate depending on where they are, what they are wearing, how they look, something like that. ¿Ok? Ah, usa que para describir o hablar de la gente abajo, the people below. Hay mujeres, hay hombres, ¿sí? Un ejemplo aquí, or do you need me to start one out? Kathleen.
Ah, el hombre que tiene una barba habla con las mujeres.
Bien, sí. El hombre que tiene barba, sí. Perfecto. I am using que to plug in a descriptor so you know which guy out of that group you're picking out. Muy bien. Excelente. Otro ejemplo. Mariana.
Las personas en la reunión saben que tiene más trabajo por hacer.
Sí, bien. Otro ejemplo. Sí, 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 me gusta, sí. Excelente. Otro ejemplo.
El
Ah,
hombre que tiene una tableta sale de la reunión.
bien, sí, que tiene la tabla. Sí, es una tabla así. Bien, excelente. Lori.
La mujer que lleva la blusa azul tiene el pelo precioso.
Sí, ok. Bien, bien. Que lleva la blusa blanca, o la blusa azul, perdón, la blusa azul. Sí, excelente.
So you
Ah,
would say just the lleva puesta, because that would
tiene,
indicate she's putting on, but
tiene puesta, has on. We use with that word puesto or puesta, which is used more commonly, I think, in Latin America. Llevar can mean wear, used a little more commonly in Spain. ¿Sí? So la mujer que lleva la blusa azul. En Latinoamérica quizás sería un poquito más común la mujer que tiene puesta la blusa azul. And it's a little more complicated to use because tiene puesta, the puesta has to look at the word blusa
right.
and go into puesta versus puesto.
That's where I
Okay?
am in Duolingo right now. I've noticed
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I'll give you another quick example of how that might work. El hombre que tiene puesta la corbata. The puesta doesn't think about the word hombre. It looks at the thing that's on him is la corbata. Que tiene puesta la corbata. The guy who's wearing the tie. Sí, hay dos hombres. Un hombre no usa corbata. El otro sí tiene puesta la corbata.
Okay.
Así. So that's a little tricky because you have to think harder about which words talking about which thing. Yeah. And we normally look, I think most people, if you're thinking in English, you're looking, you say, oh, the guy, it must be a masculine thing. But the thing we're talking about with that word puesto is la corbata. So it has to be, tiene puesta la corbata.
Okay.
So it's kind of a more complicated structure to use. Ok, bien. Hay otro ejemplo aquí. Lori, ¿tienes un ejemplo? No, no, ok.
So
Vale, bueno.
So
Oh, sí, Nora.
el hombre que tiene puesta, que no tiene puesto una corbata es un amigo de las mujeres.
Ok, sí, es un amigo de las mujeres. Sí,
yeah.
sí. Bien, bien, bien. Nora.
So I had then I had used to have lleva puesto, but that means she's putting it on as opposed to has on, right? La mujer que tiene puesta una camisa naranja, creo que la barba es fea,
Cree que la barba es fea. Cree, ok, sí. And it just means she has this on. She's wearing.
right? Okay,
That's what it means. It doesn't mean she's putting it on now.
right.
It means she
Okay.
has it on. She had that word puesto means it's put on. It's draped there. Think
Okay.
of it as kind of draping because that's what your clothes do with your body. Okay. Yeah. Puesto means placed. So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it means placed. It comes from poner.
Oh,
Puesto, which doesn't look like it might come from poner all that much, but it does. Bien. Okay. ¿Qué? Any ideas with qué? Here. Es un grupo de jóvenes. Es un grupo de jóvenes. No son adolescentes, son jóvenes, ¿sí? Usa que para describir o hablar de la gente. Abajo, aquí, es una cena. Carrie, sí.
El hombre que lleva gafas de sol está bebiendo una cerveza.
Perfecto.
hmm.
Sí, que lleva gafas de sol o lentes de sol. Es posible decir lentes de sol o gafas de sol. Los dos. Bien, sí. Excelente, Lori.
Tengo dos frases. El joven que come el trozo de pizza tiene mucho hambre. El hombre al lado del joven prefiere. Oh, I changed that. El hombre que está al lado del joven prefiere la cerveza.
Ok, sí. Muy bien, muy bien. Bueno, otro ejemplo, otro ejemplo.
La chica que tiene la cámara no está comiendo pizza.
Exacto, exacto. Muy bien.
Would you say la pizza? That's where I get confused of putting the article in or not putting the article in.
Sí.
Is it la pizza or is
Sería,
it just pizza?
sí, no es tan importante, pero aquí, porque hablamos de algo muy en general, ah, ella no come pizza. She's not eating pizza. It's just talking about some quantity of it. Probably you'd omit the la. Here's where we need a la. When we use the structure me gusta. ¿Ok? Por ejemplo, ah, ah, hoy es, hoy es miércoles. Hoy tenemos pizza. Today we've got pizza. And I'm just talking about some pizza, what we're going to have in general tonight. Yeah. But if I talk about pizza as a category of food with the structure me gusta or me encanta, or le encanta, lo que sea. A mis hijos les encanta la pizza. You really need to use la there. That structure of me gusta or me encanta, le encanta. Les encanta la pizza. Les gusta la pizza. That structure likes to use the word because we're talking about pizza as a big category, not just a bit of it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So buenas noticias, chicos. Good news, kids. Buenas noticias, chicos. Hoy tenemos pizza. Today we've got pizza. I'm just talking about, yeah, I'm just talking about a kind of uncountable amount of it. We've got some of it. Yeah, we've got this.
But
But I'm not talking about the
conversely,
whole category.
with beard, you don't say he has a beard. You just said he
You
has
might say,
beard.
you might say when I said, beard,
Beard. His
beard,
beard.
tiene barba.
That sounded strange to me. I noticed it though when I typed
Ah,
it in.
ah,
And Lori said he has
yeah,
a beard, but you repeated it just he has beard.
I do. How do I explain that?
It doesn't really matter. I just noticed it. Don't worry.
It's not a thing. It's what it, yeah. It's just the way they use that.
That's okay.
Tiene pelo negro. Could be tiene el pelo negro. You know, those little
Oh,
things you just have to listen for how people use it and repeat it that way. Um, sí. Pa. Ok, sí. Bien. Pa. Bien. Hay otro ejemplo, hay otra frase con esto. Any other sentence with this?
La pizza que compraron se está enfriando. Enfriando. It's getting cold. It's getting
Oh, sí.
enfriando.
Está enfriando, sí. It's getting cold, sí. Sí. Sí, exacto. Bien. Bueno. Muy bien. ¿Hay más o no? No. Okay. Some of the other examples of que that they talked about in last week's video were a little easier to use, and I didn't really give you guys examples to practice because there are many uses of que, but using it for an exclamation is not really hard for people to practice. See? Um, uh, uh, hay un cheque. Recibí un cheque. Qué maravilloso. I got a check. How marvelous. ¿Sí? Bien. Ah, que with exclamations people don't usually find to be a stumbling block. So we didn't pick that. If you have any other questions, though, on that little the little video on uses of que, feel free to bring that up. I picked the first two because they're the most common. Mariana, sí.
Yeah, sometimes there's a an accent mark and sometimes there's not. Is there a difference between that?
Sí, hay una There is a little thing, and it won't matter when you speak,
No, yeah, it
but
doesn't.
it matters if you write. And by the way, if you text people, it might not matter because in practical terms, sometimes when people text stuff, they leave out accent marks.
Yeah.
Young people, it's just a thing.
Old people.
Sí, nosotros también, sí, es algo que noto, es algo que noto, es que muchas veces cuando usamos el texto para comunicarnos, sí, no ponemos letras mayúsculas, no ponemos, sí, como una coma o algo así. Ok, ¿cuál es la diferencia? Ah, que when it connects another mini sentence, will no lleva acento. It has no accent mark. When it means that or who, it will not carry an accent mark. When uy, bad phone. And speaking of accent marks, I do need it when I put notes in here. When que is acting as an interrogative, a question word, then it needs to have an accent mark. Okay, so que, when it means what, and it is used as an interrogative, then it needs a question mark, or excuse me, an accent mark. All question words, interrogative words carry an accent mark. So that will include not just que, but cuándo, dónde, sí, quién, quién, or quiénes, cuál, or cuáles, cuánto, cuánta, cuántos, cuántas. See? When it's used as an interrogative, a question word, it needs to carry an accent mark. Also, when it's an exclamation, ¡Qué maravilla! ¡Qué maravilla! See? Whether it's delight, disgust, surprise. Qué fantástico. When it's used as in an exclamation, it needs an accent mark if it is written down. And of course, when you speak, that doesn't matter. It exists theoretically, but you don't, you know, you can't hear. Well, you can hear an accent mark if it denotes stress, but there it's not denoting stress. There's only one syllable to stress. Yeah. Yeah. Answer your question, Mariana?
Yes, thank you. Gracias.
Bien, bien. Okay. So that's a little point, but it is a big deal in writing. Okay. A ver. Bien. And if you have any other little questions on qué, let me know later. Bien. Adelante. We had another question come up, and it is a question that comes up a lot. So I decided that we will spend some time on it today after our video because our video had many, many examples of this. So first we're going to tackle the listening comprehension video. And later we're going to talk about the grammar topic. We have many, many, many examples of here. Aquí, bien. Estas dos mujeres nos hablaron del tiempo libre. They talked to us about free time, ¿sí? Nos hablaron no de los hobbies, pero de cómo pasamos el tiempo juntos, ¿sí? Cómo pasamos el tiempo ah, ah, cuando no estamos en la oficina, cuando no estamos trabajando, ¿qué hacemos? ¿Sí? ¿Qué hacemos típicamente en la cultura? Porque, sí, Andrea, la mexicana, la mujer que lleva puesta la camisa azul y Alma, que es española, sí, viven en dos países distintos, viven en dos culturas distintas. Así que la manera de pasar el tiempo libre la manera de pasar, sí, es distinta. It's different because they live in two different cultures. ¿Tienen ustedes algunas preguntas? I asked you to only allow yourself 3 to 5 words to look up and then just go with the ideas. Pero ¿hay alguna pregunta de algo que no entendieron? Anything you did not understand?
Los dos
Nada.
mujeres son muy buenas. Muy buenas.
Ok, bien, bien. Ah, ok, excelente. No, no little words. Oh, sí, Carrie.
Yeah, at around 2:54, 2 minutes and 54, there was a thing, it said Traves del Trabajo, and I looked it up and it was conoce a través del trabajo. I know through work, and that, I don't know that Traves, I don't know if it was just a
Los mexicanos
Well,
que he
let's see.
conocido han sido los mexicanos que conozco a través del trabajo en Dream.
That one right there, ¿sí?
Yeah.
Los que conozco a través del trabajo, a través through work,
So,
through my job.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not based on a different kind of route. It's just a word that
The a través or the
Yeah. Traves.
a través, a través is just through, in the course
Okay.
of.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was saying they travel to work. I didn't pay too much attention. I thought looked French to me.
Okay. Sí, a través is through. Sí, eso. Bien. These are the little things that I think it's para mí es normal, pero no es necesariamente normal para ustedes.
Mhm.
Okay. Sometimes I can anticipate the kind of questions they ask. Sometimes I don't know, and that's a good thing. Bien. Hay otra pregunta.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say the speed on this was very good. They were really easy to understand. And I was actually able to, I did most of it without subtitles. Sometimes there would be like a word I didn't quite catch, but I thought they were
Ah,
pretty easy to understand.
okay,
Mhm.
bien, bien, bien.
Mhm.
See, yeah, this is listed as more of an intermediate level, but I felt when I reviewed it that it was a nice constant, not too fast,
Mhm.
but they don't speak in teeny tiny short sentences all the
No.
time. They've got some longer things that are, drawn out. So it's good in that respect because it makes you connect their ideas. Uh, Excelente. I'm not, sí, Nora.
And I thought it was actually kind of boring, but that makes it easier to understand. I
Ajá,
mean,
okay, sí.
they weren't giving me any new information, but I could picture the scenes and that made it easier for learning the Spanish.
Yeah. So one thing I want you to notice, and this is kind of goes to my point of you don't have to look every word up if you listen to the context of what they're saying. At one point, Alma, they're talking about what young people do at night when they hang out together. Yeah. And she talks about something and then she calls it el botellón, which sounds kind of like botella. Yeah, and y todo el mundo sabe que lo que es una botella, everybody knows what a botella is, it's a bottle. And botellón is based on that word botella. So as you listen some more, you get the idea that what they're doing together is getting together in the street and they are
Mhm.
drinking. And they
Mhm.
take and that word botellón is known in Spain as it's kind of an improvised street drinking party. There's no one word for that. Yeah. It's just like open drinking in the streets. But they take botella and it becomes botellón. And that on the end. On is sometimes a little suffix that gets attached to names of things. Um, and in it might make that thing big, it might make that thing ugly. I know that sounds weird. If somebody calls a mujer a mujerón, they're calling him a great big woman, and it's not a compliment. Okay, a mujerón would be like a great big bruiser woman. So not a compliment. But botellón, uh, just a little bottle. Oh wait, it's a drinking party now. Yeah. Um, I don't want to say a kegger because they don't have a keg, but it would be like the yeah, the bottle version of a kegger, I guess, for teenagers and young people in our country. But as she describes it later, you get the idea that kids just bring somebody brings ice, somebody brings cups, somebody brings the booze, somebody brings a mixer, and it all gets thrown together. And that's what they do. But they're in the street. They're not in somebody's house. Yeah. And they're trying to curb that, by the way, because yeah, many municipalities are trying to kind of cut back on that, or they tell them you can go to this area, you can go to this park. Este parque sí está, no está prohibido. It's not prohibited in this park, but everywhere else, hey, keep it to yourselves, kids, that kind of thing. Okay,
Marilyn,
sí.
ah, qué es la edad de beber en España?
Qué buena pregunta. No es la edad no es tan estricta como aquí en Estados Unidos. Am, Creo que existe típicamente, pero por ejemplo, si, si un padre le da al niño un poquito del vino, no pasa nada. You know,
Mhm.
if dad lets the kid take a sip of beer or wine, no pasa nada. It's no big deal. Um, I think if you're ordering in a restaurant, it might be a little different. I actually had to think about this because we took a group of kids there and they were like bordering on the edge of that age where,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, and they were not allowed, but for legal reasons, with us as chaperones. But I am unaware of a situation where people get carded like they do here. I'm unaware of that. It may exist, but I am unaware of that. I mean, if you look old enough to drink, no 5-year-old is going to walk into a bar and belly up to the bar. Yeah. Um, but, if mom or dad have the kids have a little something, nobody kind of blinks the other way. And really, by the way, the only way I have really seen public drunkenness, like really obvious public drunk in the streets, is something like Los Sanfermines, the running in the bulls situation, because people were partying all night and people drunk in the streets. Yes, you may see it then, like some public festival where it's party all night. You may see it then. You may see it like somebody wins World Cup and people just go crazy celebrating all night again. But a normal night, you don't see a whole lot of public drunkenness. I'm not, it would be unrealistic to say it doesn't exist, but you don't see a lot of it. Uh, Culturally, drinking is meant to be done with food, not just to normally, there are people, of course, in any culture who, go to excess, but it's not a real common thing. So, and people who do it are, I don't want to say shunned, but, or shamed, but yeah, people are kind of like, hey, come on, why are you doing that? So, uh,
Doesn't she make the point that tapas are always included with
yeah.
your drink
It's
at the
common to
bars?
have something to
Yeah,
drink or something to eat
something to
when you
eat.
drink, not
Yeah.
just to drink. One thing I've heard some Spaniards talk about when they go to, for example, UK, not to put down UK. I have friends in UK, but um, um, they notice there that some people go to a pub to, you know,
Mhm.
really drink hard. And that's kind of not the cultural feeling. Um, in Spain, you drink with your food.
Mhm.
And yeah, just to drink for the sake of just drinking all night, okay, it might happen sometimes at a disco, but that, yeah, it's just not as common a thing. Okay, vale. Hay otra pregunta del video. Any other question about this?
Do they make any others? Because even Lori said how nice their flow was and how easy they were to understand the pace of it. Do they do any others together?
Sometimes, de vez en cuando, yes, they do sometimes, and they, you just have to check the site. It kind of depends, I think, on how they're planning their content. Often they pair Andrea with Agustina, and I would say that tends to sometimes be maybe a touch faster, but generally the pairing is Andrea and Agustina de Buenos Aires, the
Yeah,
Argentine gal.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, who gets paired with whom depends, I think, on their schedule. So uh, that's just a thing. Okay. Bien. I'm going to use this video to point something out. We had a request. Student request. Pidieron una lección o práctica con objetos, objetos o complementos directos. The request came across to me this way. You know, all those uses of lo, la, los, las as direct objects, I am still confused. I still have problems with that. And there are reasons you have problems with that because they're not like English. That's why. Es normal. It's normal. So we're going to take a few steps. We're going to see some examples and then maybe do some examples. That's what I would like to do today. Okay, vale. Um, and this requires some grammar ease. Sorry about that. But these are the words we're talking about. Now, here are the words that people tend to not or have fewer problems with. The me, the te, the nos, and if you're in Spain, but we don't use it here, anybody in the Latin American sphere doesn't use os, but they use it all the time in Spanish. So you will hear os used by people like Alma a lot because in Spain they do use os a lot because they use the you guys, that's the friendly as opposed to the formal, right? And that's why. But metenos, and if you're in Spain, os, those we tend to have fewer problems with, okay? Because it is obvious to whom they're referring and they don't require gender. So that's why they're easier and we make fewer mistakes with them. Oh, maybe we'll put it in the, word order. We might get mixed up about the word order a little bit, but we don't get the word metenos. We don't get it wrong. Yeah. They cause us very few problems. But these here are the ones that can be kind of a stinker. And why is that? Well, there are a number of reasons. One reason, you need to be thinking about gender, and we in English don't think very much, if at all, about gender. So we need to be thinking ahead of time when we use the word. Is that a masculine thing? Is that a feminine thing? Yeah. Is it singular or is it plural? So that's one reason that lo, la, los, and las give us trouble. Another reason they give us trouble is that lo, la, los, and las, um, they uh, they might refer to things or people. Metenos always refer to people. So there's never a question in your mind. But this lo and los might mean him, it might be it, referring to a thing. It could even maybe be you if it's the formal you, the usted you. Okay. And the same thing happens with los. It means them, but notice in English we use them to talk about both people and things, and there's no distinction. If you see, I see them in the park, who's them? It could be human beings, it could be trees. Yeah. So them in English refers to things and to people. But notice in English, we parcel that out when it's, we do differentiate in English between him, a human being, and it, an object, but we don't do that in the plural. English has got all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah. So, okay, that's another little speed bump that we have to get over. And another thing might be that these words, lo, la, los, and las, have to go in a different word order than they are in English. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But, another thing is that the word it, here is another really big roadblock. This is a big, big roadblock. This little word here, it. It in English is kind of a funky thing. In Spanish, sometimes we don't translate the word it ever at all. Yeah. And if your brain is thinking in English, you're thinking, what word do I use? And sometimes the answer is you don't use a word at all. But sometimes, yes, it will be that little word lo. So the difference between using it in English and it in Spanish is not an easy question to answer. Okay, so let's take a look. Why do we need direct objects? Uh, they are a shortcut. They refer to people or things. They can be referring to people, they can be referring to things, but they are things that receive the action. They don't do the action, okay? A direct object does not tell you who is doing something. Yeah. But the direct object might be the very first word of the sentence. And see, because in English we think in this word order, subject, who's doing it, action, the verb, and then whatever receives that action, right? We think in that word order. An English brain thinks in the order of the person you're talking about comes first, but that might not be the first word in Spanish, right? So something as simple as this question, me llamas, which generally will mean, are you calling me? Are you gonna call me? Yeah. Like, will you call me tomorrow? Me llamas. Or will you call me later? Me llamas. Yeah. The me starts it off. So whereas in English, a lot of times we're thinking about are are you calling me? That'll start off not with the word you. It'll start off with who's getting the call. Me llamas. So this is a problem because your English brain wants things in the order you've always been doing since you were 18 months old, listening to your mom and dad 24/7. Okay. Bien. So that word order piece, moving from English to Spanish, is a speed bump and kind of a big one, right? Uh, with metenos, yeah, we know it's a human being. But remember, lo, la, los, or las might fit into that question, right? Lo llamas, are you calling him? We're talking about a person. Yeah, okay, maybe your dog, because if you call your dog. But lo, la, los, and las might be referring to people or things, whereas you always know comfortably mete nos, it's obvious who you mean. Okay, so all these words, the lo, la, los, and las, they really can't be used without knowing the context of the sentence, especially the lo, la, los, las. The metenos, you kind of know the context because it's referring to a person. But the lo, la, los, and las cannot be comfortably used without knowing what you're talking about first. So those little words, lo, la, los, and las, they stand in for a person or a thing. They stand in, but you have to mention first who or what you're talking about for it to make sense. Okay. Yeah. So here's an example or a way of explaining that. You'd never walk into the house and just announce, lo tengo, I have it. If you're not showing the person what the it is, I have it. What? If you just walk in and there's no context, or like what? Is it in your pocket? Is it in the purse? Is it in your briefcase? I don't know what you're talking about. If somebody just says, I have it, and there's no previous part of the conversation, you don't know what it is referring to. So that's what we mean by context, yeah? Um, so you need to have background. You need to have background. You need to have context, yeah? Um, and here is one other speed bump we have, and it's kind of a big one with lo, especially just the word lo. Lo, a lot of times, is used in different contexts. It may be used as a direct object, to talk about a thing, but it might be used in other contexts. So, yeah, lo might be okay to use out of context if it means it when you're referring to something abstract, like this. No lo entiendo doesn't need a lot of context. Unlike the lo tengo, I have it, and you don't know what the it is. No lo entiendo means somebody didn't understand you, right? And the lo just means it. And it probably means some kind of, well, it could be a lot of different things. Yeah, I don't understand it. And if somebody talks to you and the response you get is no lo entiendo, it means I don't understand what you just said. And the lo talks about everything that you just said, right? And the lo is a very vague kind of abstract idea, right? Sometimes it in English cannot be translated into lo, right? Depends on if we're using it as a subject or it as an object. So I want to just kind of point that out because lo has many uses besides that direct object pronoun. Lo entiendo, I understand it. Yeah. And the I isn't the first word in the sentence. The lo is because we put these words generally in a plain old declarative statement in front of the verb. But here's an it that isn't translated. Me gusta. The word it won't appear at all. We don't translate it in Spanish when we say I like it. It's just me gusta. Yeah. Uh, we don't translate the word it if we say es importante. Yeah. The it is incorporated into that idea of es. We don't translate the word it if you say something like no me importa. Literally, it doesn't matter to me, or I don't care. Yeah. The it doesn't get translated. So it is a very problematic word. Okay. Bien. Many things happen with it and the whole word order thing. Yeah. In English, we're expecting this word order. Our brains are hardwired because of what we have heard all of our lives to think in the order of subject, verb, object. But in Spanish, maybe you have a subject and maybe you don't because the whole thing is rolled into the verb. So you might just have an object pronoun and a verb, and you might not even state a subject. So yeah, that's a thing. Okay, let's focus on all these little words, but especially the lo, la, los, las. Bien. I want to point out some uses of lo, la, los, las that you had in the video. Did this switch to the video for you? See? Bien? Okay. Vale. Momentito. I do need to take it off share. I need to pop a bunch of screens up so I know which examples I'm showing you guys because I've got time markers. Okay, the job of lo, la, los, las is to stand in for somebody or something. And we're going to start with aquí. Ok, bien. Bien. She's using conozco, and she's using conozco not to talk about knowing people, but being familiar with a place, which you can use conocer to talk about knowing your way around a place. I've been there. I know that place. Okay?
Cerca de la Ciudad de México, pero no conozco la costa, las playas, la naturaleza.
And here's the context. No conozco la costa. I'm not familiar with the coast, beaches, the nature, like just what the natural setting is.
Ah, no, no la conozco en México.
No la conozco. Without explaining first, yeah, la costa, las playas, la naturaleza, no la conozco. I'm not familiar with it. And she was talking about a lot of feminine things, so she throws it in as a la. I'm not familiar with it. It meaning places in Mexico, and I just mentioned a whole bunch of them, and they were feminine things. See?
Marilyn,
See,
question. Why wouldn't it be las since she was talking about three different things?
she could have, but she chose not to.
Okay.
It kind of rolled with that idea, and it's just kind of what the speaker has in their mind, but it was a lot of feminine stuff. And yeah, she didn't make it, she didn't make it plural. But she referenced a lot of things that were uh feminine things. Okay. But it's an it. I'm not familiar with it. Okay. But now we're going to show you a thing with a direct object where it isn't really a direct object. So this is a fooler with why we get confused about lo, la, los, or las.
Libre en México.
Lo primero en lo que pienso, esto es muy
Lo pierdo en lo que pienso. And lo isn't a direct object here. So this is one of those curveballs. Yeah. Lo primero. Primero is not, shouldn't lo be in front of a verb? Well, here it's not. Lo primero. Lo primero. Sometimes this is where lo will throw you a curveball, and it doesn't mean it. It's not a direct object. Lo connected to a descriptive word. Primero means first. Yeah. Talk about the order. Yeah. Lo primero, lo here is used in a real generic way. Lo primero, lo with a description means the first thing. So, cuidado, careful with that word lo. Sometimes, no la conozco, I'm not familiar with it. The la is functioning as a direct object. Here, lo is not functioning as a direct object. And you just need to know that lo primero is a chunk. Okay, so you cannot take those two words in isolation. Lo with a description, lo primero. Lo primero, the first thing. I could substitute a different description. Lo bonito, the cute thing. See? Lo bonito de caminar en el desierto. The pretty thing about walking in the desert. See? Bien. Lo difícil de pintar toda la casa. The hard thing about painting the whole house. ¿Sí? Lo difícil de pintar toda la casa. So, lo can throw you a curveball, and there it did. And now here's another curveball. En lo que pienso. Lo que is another chunk. Yeah? So you kind of have to listen with how lo is connected to the next word. Lo que will always be lo que. Lo que is a chunk. What I think. Lo primero en lo que pienso, the first thing that I think about. Okay, so cuidado. Sometimes lo is not a direct object. Let's get an example where it is a direct object. Because I'll ask you to do some examples a little bit later. Ooh, make sure I get the right time marker. Okay, I think I've got the right place here. You're going to hear los here, and it will be used as a direct object.
Sin prisa es algo muy, muy español.
They're going to be talking about eating.
Cuando los mexicanos, cuando tú me cuentas, bueno, en México compramos mucho comida en puestos callejeros.
So she's talking about where people buy their food, right? When Mexicans buy food at street stands, puestos callejeros, ¿sí?
Luego, ¿qué hacéis? ¿Os sentáis en la calle y coméis? ¿O lo lleváis a la casa y coméis?
Ah, do you stand there in the street and eat it, or do you take it home? Oh, lo lleváis, and she's just using that vosotros verb. It could be lo llevas. If she talked only to Andrea and put it in tu form, it could be llevas. So think of that as llevas instead of lleváis. O la llevas. O lo llevas. O lo llevas. Do you take it? Yeah. And here's the traditional it. If she's talking about just food in general and real abstract way, we don't really know which food she's talking about. She just plugs in the lo because it's an overall it word. See? Lo llevas a casa. Bien. Sometimes lo might be talking about something that is totally abstract. Ooh. I'm going to show you where. And I need to show you always a little before it happens so you have the context.
¿Qué hacen aquí los jóvenes?
Interesante.
Y compran su bolsa de hielo
No.
They buy their bag of ice,
y sus vasos de plástico
their plastic cups,
y una bebida como algún refresco
Wow.
para mezclar con el alcohol y eso es el botellón y eso lo hacen los jóvenes que no
eso lo hacen los jóvenes. That's what young people do. They do it. And lo is referring not to the ice, not to the cups, not to the booze. It's referring to they do it, meaning that whole big thing. So, of drinking in the street. That's what lo is referring to. Okay? Eso lo hacen. They do it. And it is a very vague thing. It's an activity. So lo is often used not for necessarily a masculine thing, but for an action, an activity. Lo is es muy flexible. It's super flexible. Lo in particular. Es más flexible que la. Es más flexible que los. Lo can be very generic. Yeah. But we're going to see something where it is not generic, where it totally talks about a specific group. I'm going to show you a little example here. Uy, ¿dónde está? ¿Dónde está? Boom, 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 boom. Okay. Bien. They're going to talk about parents taking their kids out at night and letting them stay up late and just hanging out. Okay. While they're doing their own thing.
creo que los padres tienden a llevar más a sus niños y esa
Parents tend to take their kids out more, to bring their kids along more.
idea de babysitter y de
This idea of having a babysitter
tener que buscar una persona que te cuide los niños.
and somebody who takes care of your kids.
Sí, a veces los niños se quedan con sus abuelos
Okay, sometimes kids stay with their grandparents
y los padres salen,
and the parents go out.
pero pienso que por lo general se ven bastante los niños y hacen vida en la calle como sus padres.
Qué loco, de verdad, qué padre,
Ujú.
qué afortunados, qué bonito que puedan salir y no me imagino, si yo tuviera hijos, incluso mis hermanas, no las dejaría así.
If I had kids, si yo tuviera hijos, incluso mis hermanas, if I had kids, even my sisters, incluso just as like saying even my sisters, I wouldn't leave them there like that. And the las is talking back to sisters. no las dejaría así. I wouldn't leave them out there just to wander around on their own. No las dejaría. I wouldn't leave them there. Okay. Dejar is to leave something behind or to leave something out. See, no las dejaría. The las, without talking about mis hermanas, it wouldn't be obvious. The las is standing in for the mis hermanas. So that's the job of the direct object. ¿Entienden? ¿Sí? Okay. Bien. All right. I just want to make sure that you could hear examples of how people actually use that before we
She said por lo general also.
and there's a law that's not an it. Por lo general is just a chunk. Por lo general, generally. So lo is a very, very tricky word. Okay. You have to always listen for what is lo connected to, right? If it is a chunk like lo que, what? Or lo que, the thing that, yeah, it's one thing. If it's lo primero que hago, the first thing that I do, it's not lo acting as a direct object, right? If it's you have to if it's por lo general, that's a chunk generally. If it's por lo menos, at least, that's a chunk. So lo is very, very tricky. Lo, la, los, and la. And of course, then we've got that, the complicating factor of los and las and la also mean the. So we always have to look at the context that those words are being used in. Bien. Okay. Generally, if we're going to use, because we're going to focus on not the mete nos, which we're kind of obvious with, or it's easier to understand it in an obvious way, knowing that we need a context, we need a situation to group that idea in order to use it. And sometimes you won't need to be talking about it beforehand, but you need to visually see something beforehand. Okay. So we won't necessarily need to talk about the thing if we can see it in front of our own two eyes. Okay. Si quiero hablar aquí de esa mujer, ¿sí? We won't necessarily need to be talking about the things that she's got because you can see it. Okay. Ella tiene como una camisa. She's got a shirt. Yeah. An article of clothing there. ¿Sí?
Sí.
¿Cómo se dice she has it?
La tiene.
La tiene. She won't appear at all, but the it she has does. The it leads off the sentence. La tiene. ¿Sí? La tiene. ¿Cómo se dice she's going to buy it?
La comprará. Compraré.
Okay, but you could use future, but then that puts it like out there.
Oh, she's gonna do it right now. So
Yeah, she's going to do it right now.
so you could just use the plain present, right?
Ir a infinitive. Ir a infinitive.
Va a comprar.
La va a comprar. Now here's a tricky thing. Here's another speed bump, but it's a small one. Va a comprar is a special thing. It's not one verb by itself. It's two verbs that are connected together to talk about the same idea. So it could be expressed as la va a comprar, or you could take that la and flip it to a different place.
Mm.
And it's also okay to do that because it's the two verb situation. So it could also be va a
Comprarla.
comprarla. Va a
Mm.
comprarla. That would also be considered okay. La va a comprar is fine. Va a comprarla, also fine, right? Because it's two verbs together. Now, if I changed that to the idea of she is buying it, and I use only compra, only
Mhm.
compra, the verb by itself, then it has to be in this order, la compra. La compra. ¿Sí? ¿Ok? Bien. She's using a credit card, right? Credit card? Okay.
Right.
So here's where it's kind of tough because you see it. Oh, you see it. She's going to use it. She's going to use it. Okay. Even if I'm not, I visually can see it's credit card, but I know we have to be thinking about what's the gender of that thing that we call a credit card.
Tarjeta,
La,
feminine.
Tarjeta. So to say she's using it,
la usa.
la usa. La usa para comprar la ropa. Bien. Vale. Bueno. So the it thing is not a super obvious. Well, it is super obvious visually, but we have to be thinking a little harder uh, in English to make that work because we need to be thinking about that gender thing. And, a native Spanish speaker doesn't have to think as hard because they're thinking about that right away. How about if we're talking about the kid with the little stuffed animal? Okay. And there are two ways I might think about that animal. I might think El oso think about it this way. El oso de peluche. El oso de peluche. I'm talking about what kind of little animalito, little animal he is, a stuffed animal. Or I could refer to him as el animal de peluche. Oso is bear, yeah? Oso is bear. El animal de peluche. El animal, if I say I'm giving it to the kid, I'm giving it to the kid.
Lo doy a la niña.
Lo doy a la niña. Lo doy a la niña. See? Lo doy. And I'm only using doy, one verb by itself, so it's got to come in front of that. Yeah? See? Bien? Because it's just a statement of fact. What is happening? Lo doy. I'm giving it. Yeah? And the I doesn't appear in that expression at all because it's wound into the verb doy. So, sí, lo doy. Lo doy para su cumpleaños. Lo doy, ah, lo doy am, porque lo compré ayer. I'm giving it because I bought it yesterday. See? So we may visually, if we can see it, you need to be thinking about that gender, sadly. That's not yeah. Okay.
Marilyn, could I
Sí,
just ask a question about that last one?
sí, sí.
If I said se lo doy, would that
Ajá.
be I'm giving it to her? I know that's kind of that no lay
Se
low.
lo doy. It is exact. I'm giving it to her, and the se
Okay.
is the to her, but it's got to be se because normally I'm giving it to her because I'm using two pronouns. I can't use a le paired up with a lo. Yeah, you can't le lo. So normally, if the emphasis is just I'm giving her an animal, and I name animal, I don't turn it into a pronoun, see? It's like this. Le doy un animal de peluche. Le doy un animal de peluche. And the emphasis is more the her, the le, right? The le. But once I combine the le with the little word lo, then it needs to turn into the word say. It's just a rule they have. And it's because they don't like the alliteration of lelo, lelo, lelo. So yeah, se lo doy, this is the to her. The le changes into a totally different word. Yeah, it's yet another step. It's yet another speed lock. Okay. Ah ha ha. Here is something here. Lo, la, los, las might be referring to not just things, like here, the lo, la, los, or las was referring to items, things. Lo, la, los, or las might be referring to people. Okay. And so if you see her, oh, the man, uh, I might say the man looks at her or the man sees her. Either way, let's say looking at because he's really looking at her. El joven. El joven. And you know visually. See? Sees her becomes
La ve.
la ve. It might help you to think in the word order they think in. The young man, her, he sees. That's the word order they're thinking in. We're not thinking in that word order if you grow up speaking English, but that is the order they have. El joven la ve. ¿Sí? El joven la ve de repente. He sees her suddenly. ¿Sí? All of a sudden, like a, sí. Okay. El joven, uy, el joven la nota. He notices her. Bien, sí, la nota, la nota. And it might be talking about a human being. Okay, let's talk about some other human beings here. El Papá Noel, Santa Claus, el Papá Noel. Um, wow, he sees them coming in. And the them is talking about a group. Is it all girls? It's so we've got to use the masculine for that general everybody kind of category because we have all different genders of people in that group. Uh, uh, Santa Claus, see?
Los veo.
Los bello, see? In their class, en su clase. He sees them in their classroom. ¿Sí? El Papá Noel los veo en su clase. ¿Bien? Vale. Bueno. And I can say that without really talking about them much because it's a visual. So why are we doing this with the photos? Because sometimes we say, well, you have to be talking about that item first. But if it's a visual thing and you see what's going on, you might not need to be talking about those things first. So what I want you to do this coming week is,
Question.
oh, see,
Question. I'm sorry on that last one.
see.
Isn't veo icy? Wouldn't it be
Oh,
ve?
that's right.
Oh, perdón, sí.
Okay.
Gracias. Perdón.
Okay.
La culpa es mía, sí, los ve, los ve. Gracias, sí, bien. So let's take a look at these. This week, I want you to come up with some examples and talk about these items. And you might want to use usar, perdón, usar or añadir, perdón, añadir, o preparar, anything that could be talking about cooking, or cortar, anything. See? And talk about ingredients, saying, I add them. I put these in. I chop these up. See? Bien. And think about these ingredients and maybe these ingredients and what you add them to. Oh, and here I have no names on them, so ha ha ha. You may need to be thinking about los frijoles, right? Or el queso. Yeah, el queso, and that's just a general amount. It's not, if it's all shredded cheese, you're not going to make it plural. It's just el queso. Or la cebolla. Uh, o, por ejemplo, el aceite, the oil, right? El aceite. You might, and just come up with some examples of using it. Maybe name the item and then say you use it for this recipe, or you're adding it, or I don't use it, or lo que sea, wide open. See? Bien?
Sí.
Using some it or them words. That will be your little task in those last two examples. And then you'll get a separate but non-grammar type video for listening for the coming week. ¿Sí? ¿Todo bien?
Gracias.
Good?
Bien.
Magnífico, magnífico.
Nos
Sí.
vemos.
And if sí, nos vemos. And if you've got a different topic you want to make sure I include for winter, then let me know, as someone did this week. Otherwise, happy listening for your new video. And y nos vemos, sí, la semana que viene, ¿sí? Bien, perfecto, perfecto. Muchísimas gracias por participar, sí, y nos vemos. Cuídense mucho.
Yes.
Cuídense mucho. Where did my record button go?